Hello, everyone. We are now live and we are going to, or rather, I'm going to share this into a Facebook group before we get going. So just bear with me a second.
Sure.
Yeah. Hopefully it's showing up. It always throws a bit of a span in the works when it doesn't, but let's see. Yes, there we are, loud and proud. Share to a group. And we are done. I think, yes, get in. That was nice and easy. Let's face down and we'll get going. So, hello everyone. It's so fabulous to be back, and we have another awesome interview lined up today. My special guest was a journalist and a research editor for the New York Times. Her days were awash with fact-finding, evidence and proof, and some might say stuck in the left-hand side of the brain. However, as her spiritual path unfolded, she began to rely more on living from her heart as opposed to her head. This involved recognizing we have inner spiritual senses, which shadow the physical ones of sight, touch, sound, and generally cultivating an awareness of the unseen, into just having a knowingness of truth which can't necessarily be proven. So originally from New York City, she now lives out in LA, where she conducts workshops on how to live from your authentic self, as opposed to your adaptive self. She facilitates massive energy clearings to help you step into your full expression. She undertakes energy readings on the psychic level, and much more. Please give it up for the wonderfully talented healer, psychic, and soul guide, the amazing Kristina Ensminger. Kristina, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you for that introduction. That was wonderful. You even pronounced my last name correctly. So you've been doing your homework, your research.
I certainly have, yes.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. We've got 2 viewers online. Do drop hello in the comments. Oh, Isabel has said hello. Let's have a look. Isabel, my business partner. Isabel Martin saying hello. Hi, Isabel.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. If anyone else wants to pop a hello or a question for Kristina as we progress, that would be wonderful. Right, so if you want to just dive in, I'm curious to know, first of all, as a child growing up, were you always sensitive? Did you know you were psychic, to use a label? Did you know you could see things that other people couldn't? How was it for you?
In retrospect, I realize I could. Although I don't think, at the time, I didn't really have any context for it or any understanding of it. And I think there were some things that kind of shut me down in a way that scared me, and kind of being open to that unseen world without any support in that or sort of understanding of it was, I think, just kind of scary. There was something I remembered many years later, as a teenager, the spirit of my grandfather coming to me after he had passed, and it really just shook me. And I think from then I kind of closed the door on a lot of it. And then later in life, as I started exploring a lot of this, first really through the healing I was receiving and doing myself, and then through learning this technique called aura reading, I sort of had this belief or this idea that people were just born psychic, and I wasn't one of them. It kind of kept that door closed for me. And so I think that's, something in society in general, we're not really, taught about our multisensory perception, or taught about the fact that we're all intuitive, that we all have access to, this sort of quantum field and to consciousness. And so, I think a big part of me kind of opening that door again was recognizing that, some of the things that were standing in the way were these beliefs that, psychic was just something you were born with, like being born with green eyes or something, and you either had them or you didn't. And, part of what I help people, work with inside themselves now is that understanding of, we're all intuitive. We've all got access, to the same connection.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny you sharing your story. It was similar for me. I went to see a psychic probably 20 years ago now, who put me on my path. And he said, you're psychic, you're a healer, you're not doing anything with it. And I was like, me, psychic? I thought you had to be born that way. And he's like, you don't come out the womb with a pack of tarot cards or a crystal ball. And I was like, you can develop this? He says, yeah. I said, well, how? He says, well, I take it you can read, can't you? And I was like, well, you can. He said, you get books on this? So yeah, I was totally naive as well. So we share something similar there. Perhaps I was more naive than you. I know you mentioned in your bio that you used to work for the New York Times as an editor, journalist. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that and how that, even though it was perhaps seemed the polar opposite, it did perhaps prepare you for the work that was to come.
Yes. So my sort of past life, I guess, where I started my career and I went to grad school for journalism at NYU and went straight into magazine publishing. So I was, writing and then also doing various forms of editing. And one of the things I think it's a little different in magazine publishing than it is in, let's say, news media or working for, the paper, the New York Times. I worked for one of their magazines there, but, my, just kind of that world and a lot of my conditioning really was just around proof and evidence and, being a journalist, both as a writer and a research editor. So my role as a research editor was, a lot of people don't know this exists sort of behind the scenes in magazines, but, a writer will write a piece and it's, long form. So we're on a very different publishing schedule than a daily. So, oftentimes the writer will pitch it 6 months in advance. The magazine's already running a few months in advance. And by the time it's published, it might be, over a year later. And so a research editor's really going through and kind of just double checking everything's correct, having conversations with the sources who are part of the piece. And, really just, it's all about accuracy and sort of integrity and evidence. And if there isn't a way to confirm something, it doesn't go in, it's cut. So, that was my world for a long time. And, I think, it sort of set me up in a way for the very, like the pendulum to swing, in the opposite direction to sort of the other extreme. And I was working at the times when a lot of this kind of deeper spiritual work and awakening happened for me. And so it was a very interesting contrast to be living that life sort of by day. And then, nights and weekends and vacations, going to India or Brazil or, learning some of these techniques. And as I began to open my perception and heal myself and, really come into more balance with what I would say is more of the feminine principle, which is more of the unknown, the unseen, and those sort of intuitive senses. It also became a really great training ground for me in a way to sort of practice what I was preaching or learning, and it helped me understand the difference between, let's say, sort of the logical, rational, analytical mind, and what we can prove and touch and see, which is also important. And it just really gave me an appreciation for a deeper kind of knowing, which cannot be sort of proven, but is more felt.
Yes.
And, just that sense of truth, which to me is very individual and very unique and much more felt and known on a deeper level than what can be sort of seen or proven or touched in a tangible way.
Well, thank you for that. If you're just joining, I'm interviewing Kristina Ensminger, and she's talking about her history and the inside-out nature of reality, which we'll get into in a moment. And we have 5 viewers online at the moment. We've got Deline, who joined us a little while ago. She's saying hi. Hi, Deline. Thank you for joining us. We've got Colleen saying good morning. It's obviously morning where you on your time zone.
Yes.
We've got CB Dawn from Canada joining us, also saying hi. So thank you. As I say, please, we welcome your comments, your questions, and we invite you to share this out as well if you think others will get value from this. So obviously you were talking about the going from fact-finding, analytical, left brain stuff to living more from intuition, heart space, and this sort of thing. And you went on a bit of a journey. So I'm just wondering, was it quite a quick shift, or was it slow and gradual and deliberate? How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very incremental, still in it, and will be, I'm sure, until I leave this plane of existence. Yeah, it was very much something for me that was layered and continues to be. And I think, there are kind of a couple pieces to it. There's sort of the knowledge piece, which is, learning these new techniques, reading the books, working with different teachers or guides or healers. And then there's kind of the experience piece. And I think both are really important. And so, kind of both together is what equals the wisdom. But you kind of need the framework of the knowledge to have a context for the experience. And you need the experience to really embody the knowledge. And so that was kind of, that's kind of been my experience just very gradually over the years. I'd say this all, like the wheels kind of started turning for me in 2012, and then in 2014, which is when I was still at the Times, that's when things really accelerated. Mm-hmm. But even with that acceleration over the past 5 years, I still feel like it's a very kind of incremental day by day thing. And just, this, I feel like part of just being human and being here is this nature of like kind of waking up and having those aha moments, and, then kind of falling back into what's comfortable or what the loop is, or, maybe forgetting who we are. And that's like what brings us back are the practices, and just continuing to work that muscle and keep that kind of incremental growth and expansion as a priority and a commitment, And so for me, it definitely wasn't like, I woke up and everything was online one day, although I know people who that's true for, and I think that's its own sort of journey. But for me, it's definitely been much more of that kind of spiral approach of like hitting the same point, but at the next level,
It's a good description of it. Yeah. Articulating this journey very well. So you want to go to the comments section for a second. My mate Benny, who's joined us, and he's saying hi. Thank you for joining us, Benny. That's not his real name, but that's another story entirely. So I've been reading through your website, and you mentioned, I would love you to talk about the inside-out nature of reality, but to give a little bit of context to make this link a bit more seamless. I know you said you were searching, I call it an exercise in chasing rainbows, the vacations, the next, the new partner, the new car, the new apartment, and it's sort of leaving you feeling empty until you discovered there was another missing piece to the jigsaw puzzle. So I'd love you to talk to the viewers about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I feel like I could talk about this for many days. So I'll try to keep it brief, but one of the keys for me, and this is a huge part of my own journey and a huge part of how I work with people now. And, the way that I've designed, some of my group work and even some of my one-on-one coaching work is, the key point in all of this for me, and the moment that like my journey really changed was when I didn't just understand this, because I sort of understood it for a while, but until I could really experience and embody it, this is really what changed everything for me, which is, moving from, it's really just becoming empowered, which the way that I define that is about becoming, really truly responsible as a creator for your experience. So, one of my teachers, the way that he talks about it is sort of like, you're either on the cause side of the equation or you're on the effect side of the equation, right? And you could also call that inner and outer. So, on the cause side of the equation, you take full self-responsibility. So you are creating your reality, all of your experiences. And if what's showing up, it's sort of like good news and bad news. The bad news is that you can't blame that person who's showing up like an asshole, right?
Yes.
It's actually not about them. So you can't blame them. And the good news is you're creating it. So if you want to create something different, you can choose to do that. So that's kind of being on the cause side of the equation. And to me, being empowered and really the only way to make change. There are ways we can try to move the jigsaw puzzle outside of ourselves that sometimes in the short term will work. And so it'll give us that illusion of like, okay, it really is about the things out there, but it's never lasting that way in my experience. And then being on the effect side of things, it's more about being a passenger, and it's got to be 100% one or the other. It's not you're partially responsible for this and then the rest of it is it's very binary, So either you're responsible for everything or you're responsible for nothing. So on the effect side of it, as a passenger, everything's happening to you and you have no responsibility in any of it. And so from that place, there isn't a lot of power to change your experience. And I think, typically, this is sort of a generalization, but, typically we want to be responsible for the good things that are showing up or the achievements or, whatever sort of we define as the positive side of things. And then we don't want to be responsible for the, what we would call the negative things. And so we're very split, and we're kind of like serving two masters that way, right? Which doesn't work. And our energy is very diffused that way as well. It's kind of all over the place and scattered when we're not really taking responsibility. So, this, like, on one side of it, the cause side, it's like we're responsible for the results. And on the effect side, we just have a bunch of reasons why we're not getting the results we want. So it really just becomes like, if you take responsibility as a creator of your reality, you kind of drop the blame game and the external stuff and the reasons, and take that responsibility to create something new. And you can understand this from an intellectual perspective, which I did, until you really experience it, that inner shift creating the outer change. It's completely different. Like, once you can truly see the connection and experience the result changing outside of you, once you've made that inner shift, that's what kind of helps you keep going, and continuing to take more responsibility. And really, for me, this is like the key. And sometimes you have to kind of, even if you haven't experienced that truth yet, imagine that this is true and play with it and sort of see what the results are. And once you get the results of that inner shift creating the outer change, it will be enough to, give you the energy you need to kind of shift into more of that empowered creatorship.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I used to think taking full responsibility for your reality, you're out there, had a limit to it. But then I learned that if you really want to do it and be a master at it, it's like, if war is in your external experience, even on the TV, or criminals and murderers and all that, you can take responsibility for that as well. I remember Dr. Joe Vitale with
Yes.
Ho'oponopono, the story he tells about, there was like a mental institution with people who'd been in there with heinous crimes, and they couldn't get doctors to stay. I don't know if you're familiar with the story. So they got this.
I am very much so. I work with Ho'oponopono a lot,
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
This guy went in, and that's all he did all day. He looked at the records, all the crimes they committed, the heinous acts. And he did, "I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you," day after day. And every one of them got well and were rehabilitated back into society. It was just beyond belief, beyond a miracle.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think beyond our intellectual ability to comprehend that. And yet, if we do believe in a unified field and we understand that we are all connected, anything that we can connect to any and everything, and any and everything is connected to us. So anything, especially anything we're doing with consciousness and intention in such a deep way, with such a high vibration, that has an effect. And I think the more you play with it yourself, the more experiments you run yourself, it's really the only way for you to truly experience that connection, is to feel it and to sort of get your own version of proof by that inner shift and external sort of change. Because, and I think stories like that help, the Ho'oponopono work that's out there, and, even just a lot of what quantum physics is proving about what ancient cultures have always known about the way that we're connected and the way we create reality. Those stories are really helpful to kind of prime us to believe that maybe this is possible. But I think until we experience it for ourselves, it just remains sort of this idea. And, sometimes we need the knowledge first, sort of the context of like, hey, these things are possible. And then the experience, and that's what really creates the wisdom in us. And, I think once we're able to come from that place of responsibility, and to really be more intentional with our, actions and energy and intentions, that's when shift happens, so they say.
Yeah. Isabel said, very well put, and she's loving the clarity of how you're explaining things. And I quite agree. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you.
Again, just reading from your website, which we'll give the address a little bit later on. You talk about something which really piqued my interest, needing to hold more energy in order for your life to be more adventurous, to experience more. And can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that? What
Yes.
by that?
Yes.
More energy.
Yeah, it actually kind of follows with, what I was talking about before in terms of intention. To me, the best way I can and describe sort of the inner outer as well, and how that connects to the way we're sort of using our energy to create our reality is that, as, let's say, the more I let go of, the more I shed that, is leaking my energy or is an old version of me or something that's no longer serving me, the more I let go, the more space I then have to fill with this sort of higher vibration, this intentional vibration. And with that vibration shift, or, your consciousness raising, or whatever you want to call it, your perception changes. And as you change your perception, your reality changes. So that's kind of the inner outer connection. And so what's actually changing is me, my energy, my perception is changing. And the world outside of me is responding to that, right? Vibrationally, just from a complete frequency perspective, not from a mental perspective. And so, this is also kind of the way that I think really of like alchemy is, changing the outside by changing the inside, the perception of the outside. And so, as we go through this process of healing and releasing and, really kind of letting go of the things that are either leaking our energy or even just things from the past, this lifetime, beyond, if you believe in that. We're just really the same way you'd be decluttering your home. The more you let go of, the more space there is to be. And then we choose what to fill that space with. So, again, this is like a more layered approach and a more of a practice than it is a magic bullet. You don't just sort of receive one healing and raise your vibration and your whole world changes, right? It's possible. But, for me, what this really comes down to, like, why do we do this? What's the point? What's the result? What are we sort of, what's the intention really? And for me, it's not about, fixing yourself or improving yourself. It's really just about, getting closer to what's true for you. And the more of your own focused, intentional, creative power that you're holding, the more energy you have to create. So it's not just, let's say, about like taking an action, but when you take an action with intention, the result that you receive is the desired result, right? So I love, Gary Zukov has this great analogy that I think is perfect about, when you're using your creative power, you're taking action without intention, it's sort of like driving with your windshield painted black. So let's say the destination you want to arrive at is appreciation. Yeah. So you're giving someone something, and your subconscious, let's say, intention is to end up at the destination of appreciation. So you're giving in order to receive. And when, let's say, you start driving the car where you can't see where you're going, where you end up might be resentment or disappointment because you don't, let's say, receive that desired result. So it's like, if you're expecting a certain outcome or reaction or response, okay, then you're arriving at disappointment instead of appreciation, right? But the more intentional you become about why am I taking this action, the more aligned you become in your thoughts, words, and actions, is when you actually start to receive these desired results. So, part of doing this is not having those sort of subconscious intentions behind the scenes running things where you believe you're taking an action for a certain result, but all of the energy here is what's really driving the bus. And, the way that we can sort of see this in our own experience or in our own reality is, really connecting with the times where, we think we're taking an action, or we think we know the intention, let's say, but we're receiving a very different result. That's one way to see it, And another way is just, to really, there might be sort of that thing we've wanted to do for years, whether it's, take a trip or write a book or, some kind of dream we've had or goal we've had or vision we've had for ourselves that, maybe we take action on, but we kind of tread water or just never really, kind of manifests into anything. And, these are the ways we can see where our intention is actually something different if the result that we're getting is not what we're desiring or intending. So really, it's, holding more energy is about sort of raising your frequency and letting all the things go that baggage, that's weighing you down and not allowing you to create from that intentional place. And it's also about, coming more into alignment with what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing, our authenticity, and, not having that energy dispersed in 100 different directions because we're thinking one thing, saying another thing, and then doing another thing. So yeah, I'll pause there because I feel like this is another thing I could talk about all day.
That's awesome. I'm sitting here squirming a little bit because you're touching some points with me because I want to do one thing, but my actions don't line up. Which is a whole other story. Isabel.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's hear it.
Isabel saying, love that analogy. It's very useful visual reminder of deliberate living. Thank you. You are very articulate. I'm happy to talk about it like another time, but it's not for the here and now. Trust us. I'll tell you later. But thanks.
Okay. In the green room later.
Something else you said, which is very key. We aren't broken. and it's not about self-improvement. If that is where you're coming from, it's a false premise, isn't it? It's more about growth, or choosing to experience something different that is serving you, but you're not broken. That's quite a damning, um, quite a damning place to come from, to think, oh, that person's broken, or I'm broken. Or, yeah.
Right. And even if you think about it from, from this place of, okay, you can create change from the vibration of self-loathing or self-hatred or believing you're broken. And what will that create? You can still create change that way, but does that hold the energy? Like, does that make you feel good in the end? Is that something that feels expansive, And when you're creating from a place of acceptance and love and empowerment and, sort of creating this, change or aligning with this growth from that place, the results you're creating are very different. And so, there are plenty of people who, I think maybe working out is a good analogy. You can be going to the gym and the energy behind that intention could be more about not being good enough or not, having abs or needing to look a certain way in order for you to feel better about yourself, and that produces that's a very different energy than, going because you love yourself and you want to be healthy and care for yourself. And, even just those subtle energetics are really important. And then that, to me, this all comes back to, the intention behind the actions we're taking, because it's not just as simple as saying, like growth and expansion are important things to me, but how are you approaching that growth and expansion, right? Because the change part of it, right, is inevitable. That's change is happening. That is life, right? And so change is going to happen whether or not we're conscious about it, intentional about it, participating in it. The growth piece is more like the choice. Do we want to align with that and do it in a conscious and an intentional way? Or do we want to be on the effect side of the equation and have it be sort of done to us, right?
Yeah.
So intention is really important.
Thank you for that. Yes, that makes so much sense. You have a energy healing technique, a modality, if you like, to help clear all this baggage away that you mentioned earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yes. So, I feel like this sort of release work and letting our baggage go is done on many levels. There's a very sort of a physical way to do it, sort of mental in terms of our beliefs and things like that, emotional, which is another level, and energetic as well. And so one of the ways that I work with people is with something called the Rising Star, which is an energy healing technique that it works with all the elements, and it works on all layers of your being. And it's a source to source. So it's similar to a Reiki, which people are more familiar with. But the vibration is very different and the process is very different. So you receive a single session. So let's say an hour-long session, but the energy moves for 21 days from that one session. So what that's doing on an energetic level is, it's working just with your 7 main chakras, and it's doing 3 full sweeps of all of your 7 main chakras. So it begins at your crown, moves down to your root, comes back over to your root, moves back up to your crown, back to your crown, and back down through your root. And so it's on 1 chakra per day over that course of 21 days. And, you know, again, you can sort of be aware and intentional with the process, or it can just kind of be doing its thing and it will do its thing either way. But I really love working with it on a more intentional level. And that's part of the work that I do with people is, you know, really understanding more about what is each chakra kind of connected to, what are some of the themes and, you know, some of the connections that come up for us in each of these spaces. And, you know, they're all connected, so you can't really single one out, but it's helpful just from a focus perspective. And with the energy moving in one of those areas each day, it helps you really focus on that space and on your experience. And so as the energy moves through you for those 21 days, it's really just kind of shedding a lot of energetic layers and, you know, things that, you know, as it brings you kind of this higher frequency, it's releasing a lot of those lower frequencies that are no longer serving you in these places. So when you work with it intentionally and bring your awareness to that chakra, that energy, or what's moving, what's being released, you also participate in the process. So on a conscious level, you can also really see, wow, this thing's coming up for me. You know, and the rising star can do that. It's very catalytic. So it can kind of, you know, bring up a pattern or something outside of you that helps you to see what's that connection inside of what I'm really letting go of. And you can either re-engage with it, or you can sort of see it for what it is, which is just that reflection of like, wow, this is what's surfacing to allow me to kind of let go of this belief or this pattern or this dynamic in a relationship or whatever it might be. And when you work on that conscious level with it, you can move even more energy. And, you know, the process of the rising star is also kind of incremental. So it's like each one picks up where the last one left off. So before you can really just go straight down into the root of something that maybe has been planted there for 40 years, first you have to kind of rake the leaves, you know, then you like pull the weeds, you know, then you might need to dig for a bit. And so each of these rising star healings is helping you to get through those layers, with the intention being that eventually you get to that core of like what all those branches or whatever was really connected to. And once you release that, there's nothing left in your field that's vibrating there. So again, that external, this doesn't exist out here once it's released from here. So yeah, that process is on an energetic level. There are a lot of ways you can also work with it, you know, more consciously and with your awareness and your emotional body and all kinds of things, which is part of the kind of the reflection work that I do with people. But just from an energetic perspective, the rising star is really coming in and doing that, you know, kind of vacuuming things up for us in our energy field. And once that space is created, what it's then doing is filling you up with this very high vibration source energy to fill that space of what you've just released. So again, that's sort of like when that frequency or that vibration is raised, you know, and that perception has shifted, that inner shift is what's creating that outer change.
You have such an amazing way of explaining all this that makes sense. And they say if you can do that, it means you actually have an embodied understanding of how something works. And if you can't explain it simply, it means you don't quite understand it yourself, and clearly you do. And even though I'm not necessarily learning anything new per se, I'm hearing it from your unique viewpoint. So it's kind of bedding in, it's landing for me more as well. So perhaps I had lacked my own understanding to a degree as well. If we can move on for a second, again from your website, you talk about your authentic self versus your adaptive self, and this is obviously key to your work and key to growth and exponential growth. And can you talk us through your thoughts on that, please?
Yes. So this kind of comes back to, the windshield being painted black and arriving in destinations that we don't expect to end up in. And, there are many ways and many different sort of approaches to going into this, or, shadow work, or kind of the lower self and the higher self, or a lot of different ways of describing it. But the way that it's felt most sort of true for me, when I started exploring, those layers of how am I ending up in these destinations that are so different from what I'm intending. And, part of that work in me, that kind of shadow work, was identifying these parts of myself that I really didn't want to look at, that I didn't believe were there, that I didn't want anyone else to see, that I didn't want to admit to myself were there, because if I admitted they were there, then maybe somebody else would see them. And, a big part of this for me is like, it's not easy work. It's definitely not very marketable work, because you're really going into the places that, like, everything in you has sort of designed this incredibly complex system for you to avoid, deny, repress, avoid. So as you begin to kind of work with this process, which for me took many years and a lot of support, a lot of teachers, a lot of things. And it's also the most, powerful work I've ever done, and has created the most change in my life, because those are the places we're really disempowered. Those are the places where we're really, we lack awareness. And so these adaptive selves, they're not they're not the enemy. They're not meant to be destroyed or cut off. They just really want your attention. And what I found for me was that, some of the ways I identified them at first, especially when I was very afraid to kind of go down into that personal hell of shadow of mine, was to start noticing outside of myself. There's kind of this polarity of shadow that I work with people. And it's both a positive and a negative thing. So it's not just about the parts of ourselves that we're trying to hide. It's really about the unexpressed parts of ourselves across the spectrum. So the way I really started working with it myself at first was on the negative side of the polarity. What am I judging in other people? What am I critical of in other people? That's the first key to the part of yourself that you don't want to look at. And so I started working there. And then the more I understood about it, I started working on the sort of positive side of that polarity, which is, who are the people I really admire, and who are the people I really look up to in a way that, they're doing something that I just think is so incredible that I could never imagine, sort of expressing myself, and then to start paying attention to those parts of me too, who are looking for expression. And expression, doesn't mean like I go tell everyone off or what I'm thinking, or, get a bullhorn on the street and start letting all my lower selves and adaptive selves, like, sort of tell everyone what they're thinking. Expression is just within you, so that attention. And so these adaptive selves, they're often like they're younger parts of us that were born out of fear or protection or wanting to belong, wanting to be accepted. And so, they're still kind of running those fear loops, and they're still trying to protect us in those ways as if we are 6 years old or something. And they don't really care what kind of attention they get. They're sort of like a little kid who just wants your attention and will act out, even if it means getting punished. Even if it's negative attention, they just want your attention because you've been avoiding, repressing, denying, cold shouldering them for so long. And so, you don't necessarily need to give them the keys to the bus and let them run wild. They just need to be expressed to you. And so there's lots of ways to do that. But, these are the selves that are kind of the bouncers to what's more true and authentic for us inside, because they're the ones who are trying to please the outside and belong with the outside and protect from the outside, and really just based in fear. And so in order to get to that deeper part of ourselves, we need to really acknowledge them first and, give them some attention. And it is a relationship. And so, it's something that you kind of do over time. And, the authentic self, to me, sort of the deeper self behind all of those characters, is not sort of this like static, unchanging, sort of holy thing. It's this really dynamic, ever shifting, part of us that is our true nature and our true essence, and is based in love, not in fear. And so as we attune more to that, and that's also a relationship and a practice. It's not something that we find that is static, then we're there. It's something that, every day, it's our conscious choice, who we're giving the keys to, which vibration we're attuning to, which intention we're allowing to sort of drive our thoughts and words and actions. And so, sometimes that experience of self, that really true essence, sometimes we need to experience it outside of ourselves first to really have it reflected. I know that was true for me. So that's, the real intention of someone like a guru, right? Is just, you are you, right? So they're just meant to reflect that in you, and for you to experience that vibration, not of them being that sort of true, holy pedestal kind of thing, but to really start to feel into that vibration yourself. And so sometimes we need to kind of have that reflected before we can really feel it, because it has been so buried. And then over time, it's like just that practice and that discipline to let go of all those old selves, or who we were, or who we thought we were supposed to be, or who so-and-so wanted us to be, to just get closer and closer to, okay, well, who am I now? Who's ready to sort of be here now, be born now? And that's always changing. That authentic self is not a destination, let's say. It's a very dynamic thing. And so, a lot of, at least the work for me, has been about how can I let go of all this baggage, all these selves from the past, all these things that aren't really me right now in this moment, and how can I really attune to that truest version of me, And so Yeah, I think working with the many selves we all have is it just another big key to that, kind of empowerment or intentional creation of our reality and our lives.
Yeah, I know I've been working with my inner selves for a lot of years now, and to see I've changed and transformed and experienced exponential growth will be something of a massive understatement. Um, Finally, you've got a program called Emerge, and it's coming up again. Can you share something about your program, which deals with all this, puts it all together?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I really created Emerge, which is it's kind of a 3-month immersion, and in it we work with the rising star, and a lot of kind of self-awareness techniques and reflection techniques, as well as different sort of energy techniques of how to begin to work with your own energy more powerfully. And I threw a couple little like bonuses in there. We do a little aura reading circle just for fun, where you get a message from that self that we're sort of talking about, your spirit. And it's really about finding all of the places in you that aren't really you anymore and letting those go. And really attuning with what that authentic self feels like for you, and how to really begin expressing that authenticity for you. And so the way that I designed it was kind of the phases that I found in my own journey, and kind of all the tools and techniques that really helped me. And so, we begin with really working with empowerment and the places we're leaking energy, and how to reclaim that energy and work with it. And then expression. And so once you kind of call all that energy back, what do you do with it, right? Once you have more energy, it's, kind of allowing that flow, because, what happens a lot of times, it's like a garden hose or something that we've kinked in all these places, and we've sort of blocked the energy from moving. And so as we release a lot of that, we need to kind of practice letting that energy kind of flow and be expressed. Again, not necessarily in the world, but sometimes in the world. And then the last piece is really about expansion. And so it's about, once we let go of all this baggage, and we have more space and we have more energy, how can we then begin intentionally creating? And so the idea with Emerge is, it's really for people who feel kind of underexpressed or disempowered in, a certain area of their life, whether that's creatively or in their relationships or in their career, with their spirituality. They might still be kind of hiding in the magic closet and not really telling people they're doing this kind of work, or discovering these gifts about themselves. And maybe it doesn't really align with the outer world yet. And I've found, it's also really helpful for people who are in big transitions of shifting one or more of those areas of life, to really bring that energy in and reclaim a lot of that energy. And sort of as you emerge, after this 3-month process, it's really about an intentional creation. And so that's in any area of life that can sort of be, related to. But I think overall, the closer we get to that authenticity within ourselves and the expression and how to create, the life that we want, the world that we want to see, how we can really do that from an intentional place, and, do it together, have support in this process, which, for me was crucial. And yeah, it's been a really incredible group so far. The next one, the enrollment begins April 15th for the next group. And I haven't announced this yet, but there's a very special guest who will be part of the next Emerge group, who's one of my teachers. And I call her my fairy goddess mother. She really just saved my life in so many ways and taught me so much. And she's going to be sort of one of our guests coming up. So that will be announced soon. And yeah, I'm really excited about doing this work in a bigger way with people.
So you heard it here first. I'll just put your website across the screen. I was doing it a little bit earlier as we were talking. So it's voyagesspirit.com is Kristina's website. I've spent a lot of time on that in the last couple of weeks, just not least gleaning nuggets of information for this interview. But it's a really cool place to visit, and I recommend that you do so. And there's also a really cool guided meditation on there to get grounded and present, which is a nice treat and a nice, lovely bonus. We've got Debbie Twist, who's also just joined us. Yep, Deb's here. Hello, Deborah. We just talked about you before you came online. So lovely to have you join us. So yeah, I really recommend you checking out Kristina's website, voyagesofthespirit.com, and consider joining up for the next Emerge on the April the 15th. We talk about exponential growth, and there's no such thing as a magic pill, but when you get involved in these techniques and on these programs, it's the very closest thing you can get to a magic pill, undertaking these energy clearings and doing the shadow work, setting intentions and becoming more conscious, more deliberate, more aligned, more congruent. That's when the magic of your life starts to happen. That's when the adventure unfolds. Kristina, you've been amazing. You've been awesome. I've learned so much myself from you.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any final thoughts before we call this one a wrap?
No, just thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's been, this is my favorite, thing to talk about. And, I really love the work you're doing as well. And just creating this platform, for people to have these conversations. And so I'm really grateful to be here and really enjoyed talking. So thank you.
Nice one. Thank you. Debbie's just saying Kristina is an amazing, powerful goddess.
Hi, Deb.
On Isabel, nice comment from Isabel, just saying, so love the clarity and the flow of this interview. We're all of like minds, and it was a yummy treat to meet Kristina. Thank you to both of you. Bless you, Isabel. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Oops, it stopped. There we go. So much love to you all. Thank you to my amazing guest. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.